Hey guys, Tyler here from GarageWarrior.com, and I'm super excited today to have with me for this expert interview, Shaun Hadsall. How's it going, Shaun?
Going great, man. Thanks for having me on, Tyler.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, man, coming on the call to talk about getting lean, doing things right with nutrition. Some of the stuff that we're going to talk about is kind of counterintuitive to some of these really popular trends like the paleo community, so it's going to be a fun call. You guys definitely have to listen to this whole thing because Shaun is a sharp guy. But before we lead in, Shaun, why don't we talk a little bit about your backstory for the people who might not know who you are. Who are you, and what is it that you're trying to teach the world?
Well, I'm a stubborn fat expert, so I'm really good at helping people get rid of stubborn fat. I mean, everybody knows that we could give you one of 1,000 plans.
Right.
And if you followed it consistently, you're going to lose your first 10, maybe your first 20 pounds, depending on how much you have to lose. But then it gets tougher when you get down to that last little bit. So that's what my specialty is, and I do it through carb cycling. And it all started back in 1998 when I was a first runner-up finisher in the Body for Life contest that Bill Phillips held, and I think that company and that contest still exists to this day.
Right.
So, but basically through that contest, what I found was two things. Number one, I didn't need to exercise 9, 10, 11 hours a week to stay ripped and lean.
Right.
So I learned how to cut my exercise time down dramatically, and I now train 4, 5 hours a week, maybe 6 max, because I like it, but I only have to train 4 or 5 hours a week to stay lean.
Right.
And the other thing I learned is that fitness and exercise and nutrition in general are a catalyst that feeds every other area of your life. So when you're disciplined in those areas, you're going to be disciplined as a father, or as a husband, or spiritually, or as a business person. So every other area of your life is going to improve. And that's the biggest epiphany I had back in 1998 when I placed first runner-up. It wasn't really the recognition for the placing as much as it was the life changes that had happened to me. And that's kind of how I got into the industry. And since that time, I went on to own and operate a top 10 personal training studio in the world to help hundreds of people locally here in the Michigan area where I live. And then back in 2009, I made the leap. I saw a lot of changes, not only in the economy, but with the company that I was working with. So I made the leap into the online world. So that was a couple years of struggling because nobody knew who I was. And then last year, beginning of last year, 2012, we were able to break through with my 14-day rapid fat loss plan, which is just a proprietary nutrition plan that's based on a concept called macro patterning. And macro patterning is just a fancy word for carb cycling. So here we are.
Yeah, here you are, man. You know, what's funny is that I actually bought that book because I saw some of the bigger fitness names, some of the bigger diet gurus mailing out to it, and I bought it. I took a look at it. I was like, this is some good stuff. And then lo and behold, this January, I end up in an event in Miami, and you're there, and I'm like, hey, you're Shaun Hadsall, right? So we got to talking, and now you're on the show, right? It's crazy
Awesome,
how things work. So let's dig into some information here, Shaun. Let's give people something they can work with at home. And so one of the things that impressed me about you is you got some pictures up on your websites and stuff, and you're lean, man. You run around, what, like 6, 8%, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that I stay under 10% year round, and the majority of the time I hover right around between 7 and 8.5%.
Yeah.
Pretty consistently, and I don't do anything radically extreme to maintain that look.
Absolutely.
So we can talk more about how I do that. And it doesn't matter if you're a guy or girl, you're old or young, the methods that I use can be applied by anybody.
Absolutely. Well, let's dig into that a little bit, because you know what? When I'm being good, I can get down to that 10% range. When I'm being okay, I hang out on that like 12 to 14% range, right? And so what's your secret, Shaun? What's the real secret in terms of nutrition? We'll start there, and then we'll maybe we'll dig into exercise next, of staying so lean, getting people from that stubborn fat down to that point where they got the 6-pack abs or whatever their goal is.
Well, I think, before we even talk about one area individually, what most people need to understand is synergy. And that is the fact is that, proper nutrition is not going to get your abs to pop out or make your stomach flat. Neither is proper exercise, and neither is proper strategic cardio or intervals. It's the combination of those three things working together synergistically, not perfectly, just consistently. So that's one thing that people will always do is, like, I'll find a person that all they're going to do is exercise, like do a cardio and eat right. And they're going to lose some weight, but if they're a pear apple-shaped body, they're going to end up like a smaller pear apple. So we need to incorporate weight training. Most people leave that out. So I always find that somebody's missing one of those three pillars. So first things first, before we dive into nutrition, is understanding that you need to have all three of these things working together on a weekly
Right.
basis in your life. If you don't have them working together, you're not going to be able to get any results, let alone get rid of the stubborn fat. Now, with that being said, when it comes to nutrition, there's a very simple philosophy that you can follow as a lifestyle, and it doesn't matter who you are, to force your body to burn more fat. And what I specialize in doing is teaching people, first of all, how to turn off their body's dependence on sugars. Most people,
Right.
because they've consistently eaten unhealthy off and on most of their life, we're all human, what ends up happening is the body becomes a sugar burner instead of a fat burner. So the first thing I teach people how to do is to follow a strategic low-carb plan. Okay, and I say strategic because we only want to do this for a limited time. We have to use a low-carb plan just to turn off the body's dependence on sugars and turn on their fat burning switch, or program their body to actually start using fat fuel as a fuel source.
Right.
So what we do is we do a 7-day diet or deplete week, and we teach people how in 5 to 7 days to strategically lower their carbs for a short amount of time. Low carb diets can be tricky, and they do work, but it's a temporary quick fix if you're not careful. So with macro patterning, what we do then is we add carbs back in at strategic times, about 3 days of the week, or maybe even 4, depending on the person and the goals.
Right.
Particularly post-workout. So it does a couple things. So by actually increasing carb intake in the post-workout window or even on a cheat day, now we're overcoming all the pitfalls of a traditional low-carb diet. So what I do is I teach people how to go maybe deplete and keep their carbs maybe 50 to 100 grams
Right.
on their cardio or their interval days, and then 3 or 4 days of the week strategically having starches and fruits in the post-workout window after weight training workouts.
Right.
So now you're actually feeding your body carbohydrates at the time it's going to utilize it as fuel, but most importantly, you're keeping your hormones happy, and that's where most people miss the boat.
Yes.
It's very easy to talk nutrition, exercise, all that stuff, but what about hormones? So we have several of them coming into play, particularly your thyroid. When you go low carb for 4 or 5 days, studies show you'll naturally suppress your body's ability to convert T3 to T4. Macro patterning can fix that. It's the same with leptin levels. Leptin is the Mac Daddy hormone. It basically controls all other hormones, and it communicates to your brain and to your body whether or not you should be burning fat or whether or not you should be storing fat. So by strategically keeping carbs low a couple days of the week and strategically keeping carbs high a couple days of the week, we keep leptin levels happy and in check. And then we also improve our insulin sensitivity by following this plan. So that's how you can kind of get the best of both worlds. And that's really kind of like the bird's eye view of
Right.
macro patterning and what the 14-day rapid fat loss plan is all about.
Yeah, I'm so happy you brought that up, Shaun, because, when people talk about fat loss, sometimes they overcomplicate things. But you just made it really simple in terms of like, hey, listen, your hormones are king, and here's how we make your hormones happy. And I also like how you laid out the energy systems, because some people don't realize you either get to burn carbohydrates or fat. You can't do both like at the same time. You have to choose. And so by doing that carbohydrate cycling like you're talking about, and then matching them up to the particular types of workouts, you're actually going to accelerate people's results much faster. So that's
Exactly.
awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and you're not going to lose muscle. That's the other big thing too, is that low carb diets what ends up happening is a lot of people end up losing muscle mass if they do it for long periods of time. So low carb works, but it's you got to be careful. You got to be smart about it. And that's what's unique about macro patterning as well, is that you can still eat whatever you want on the macro patterning plan. You just have to be smart about it, right? You can't be stupid. I mean, we obviously know that 5 or 6 days of the week we're going to have to make healthy food choices if we want results. There's no way around that. However, you can still get lean and have a life following this type of plan. And I think that's what it's all about. It's one thing to lose 10, 20 pounds, but if you can't keep it off, what good is it? And that's kind of what my philosophy is about, is once you get it off, now you can still have a life and you can keep it off.
Totally. Well, maybe you could give the listeners a little bit more of a scope into like what a week would look like. So you said you do like a low carb depletion where you just drop the carbs for a whole week. Then after that, how do you kind of cycle? How do you create this macro pattern so that people get good results consistently?
The great thing to do is what I have people do. I mean, we have several different carb cycles that we take people through. And the easiest one to follow is really just alternating lower carb, or what we call deplete days, with higher carb, or what we call carb up days.
Right.
And so a great example, and it's very simple that anybody could do, is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you'd weight train, and those would be the days that you're high carb days. You would just carb up and you'd have more carbs in your post-workout window. Now, a sidebar on that is understanding most people think that things like white rice are evil, and it's
Right.
not. In fact, I gorge on white rice, and so does my wife, who's 53 years old, and she stays very fit year round. But we do it at the right time, and we combine it the right way. And those white starches will actually fuel your body's ability to process and utilize carbs more efficiently. It'll speed up your metabolism. It'll help the thyroid, like I talked about. And at the same time, it's going to keep you happy because you're not going to be depleted of carbs all the time. And that pure white glucose that's found in white rice on these, 3 days of the week, maybe doing it in the post-workout window. It could be potatoes. It could be any type of clean carbohydrate. Squash is a good one, all that stuff. What ends up happening is that pure white glucose from things like white rice and potatoes is actually necessary to fuel our body's ability to burn more fat. Now, if you're not an exerciser, the game totally changes. Your metabolic needs are going to be completely different. So one day, that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we're basically going to consume the majority of our carbs for that day in the post-workout window. That's going to be a weight training or resistance training type of workout. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, we would carb down or deplete and keep starches and fruits a lot lower. And those would be our fat burning days.
Right.
And what would happen is on those days, you would dive into a strategic high intensity cardio protocol of some kind. Obviously, you have lots of choices. I have a method in my 14-day rapid fat loss plan that teaches people how to cycle their cardio workouts just like their carbs or their food. So teaches people how to prevent their body from plateauing through using the right interval techniques. But 3 days of those week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you should go ahead and engage in that exercise session. And because you didn't consume a lot of starches or fruits on that day, now catecholamines are going to raise in the bloodstream, which are fat-burning hormones, and you're going to access and burn more stubborn belly fat. And if you follow the protocol that I prescribe and use high-intensity approach the right way, you can actually legitimately target belly fat and release the hormones that have been shown to break apart the stubborn fat, the stuff that's tough to get rid of. So hopefully that makes sense. And then there's one day of that week, Tyler, we want to do a cheat day just because, one, we want to have a life. We want to give yourself a reward, right? So that's important. You just can't binge or go crazy on the cheat day, but it's also good for the hormones like we discussed earlier. This is a great way to keep insulin sensitivity and leptin levels in check. Why you give yourself that reward, and that's what will sustain you the other 5 or 6 days of the week when you're following a more structured and clean eating plan.
That's fantastic. So just one more question on that. That was an awesome bit of information, you guys at home. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, weight training and a little bit of carbs after the workout. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, depletion carbs, cardio and intervals. And then Sunday, relax, kick your heels up. So if you could just give us like a carbohydrate threshold for those days, like on a depletion carb day, what's a kind of a good range? And then on a day when you're carbing up after a workout, what's a good range?